So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I've chosen what to sort of work on with the manifesting thing over the years. Um, for me, it was always key that whatever I was trying to create was believable. And I think it's probably key for everybody, but some people may be able to sort of take on a state that is further ahead, uh, you know, than what I was able to do in terms of how far ahead of where I currently was, my imaginal scene was, or my aim was. For me, I was easily able to accomplish big things as long as I sort of did it in baby steps. Um, for me, the next step that I achieved was always something incredibly believable. Like when I first started out with money, my first ever intention was, and I clearly remember this, was I remember thinking if I could just always have $1,000 in the bank, I would stop overdrawing my bank account all the time. Like that, there would be enough in there if I needed a car repair. Like I need $1,000 in the bank at any given time. I remember having that intention, setting that intention. It was not only believable for me, but I was like, I'm ready for this right now. Like if somebody just dropped $1,000 in my lap, I would have been like, yes, you know, goal achieved. And I would have put it in the bank for exactly what I wanted it to be put there for, as a safety net. And then, once that was sort of in place, the next thing I wanted was to always have all my bills paid a month ahead. And I got that idea in my head, and it was a firm intention, and quickly I achieved that. Really quickly. Like we're talking small baby steps here, and that can lead to a lot of achievement over to a small period of time. Um, if your end goal is to go from being flat broke to, say, having $200,000 in the bank, that's something that is an incredibly achievable thing over a period of, like, say, 5 years. Um, and some people might tell you, well, don't put a 5-year time limit on it, or, don't make it so that it has to take 5 years. And I agree with that. If you can sort of take on that state, you can certainly create it faster than that. For me, I always sort of, I think, I partly wanted to experience the whole process, but I also just, I don't know, the idea of going from 0 to 60, I couldn't really buy it. So I did this incrementally, but very intentionally. There was never just letting it go and seeing where it ends up. I always had a next step. And the next few steps were always kind of in my mind. So once I had the $1,000 kind of down pat, and then the bills were paid a month ahead of time. Well, then I wanted a certain amount of revenue from my business every month. And I sort of meditated on that number and intended for that to happen, and allowed things in 3D to sort of happen to make that come about. And so my journey from being broke to being pretty well off, I will describe the amount of time it took. From having $1,000 in the bank to having an average of about $5,000 in the bank was probably about a year. From having $5,000 in the bank to having, at any given time, about $10,000 in the bank was about another year. And then once I hit that point, something shifted a little bit. I started to feel different. I started to feel like I could handle more. And so I started having bigger intentions. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to buy a new car. Both of those things happened within about 6 months of hitting that $10,000 mark. And then at that point, I started having bigger and bigger, it became much more believable for me for my business to start making a lot more money. Around that time, um, I started thinking, okay, I want $500,000 in revenue. And then I was thinking I want $1 million in revenue. And the $1 million in revenue thing for me, at some point along the way, it not only became possible, it just became inevitable in my mind. And it was certainly not at a point where I could reasonably expect that to happen based on the 3D reality. My business partner, I remember, was saying, like, you're crazy. It's never going to get that high. And I was like, no, it's 100%. If we don't see $1 million in revenue in the next 3 years, something has gone horribly wrong. I remember saying that to a couple different people, to my aunt, who also is an extremely successful business person, talking to her about stuff, because I think we were having a conversation about what a great role model she was for me and everything. She is a childless, successful business owner. But I remember saying to her, if we don't have $1 million in revenue in the next couple of years, like the only thing that could have happened is like something went terribly wrong, like we went out of business or I got sick or something. That will happen if we stay on the trajectory we're on. And it did. And honestly, when it got to that point, that was sort of my ultimate goal. And beyond that point, I didn't really have any other goals. After that, it was kind of like, okay, how can I keep this level of income while working less and less and less? And that did, in my mind, the next goal was have this level of income while like reducing my workload by half and then by another half. And I'm to the point now where I only work like 25 hours a week, which is honestly starting to feel like a little bit much, even for that. My next goal is going to be have the business entirely run by somebody else. But it's sort of like a doubling in expectations, the way I look at it. It's like at first you just want a little bit of, well, I don't want to say you want. If you're like me and you're not comfortable with imagining like you becoming a millionaire from being a hundredaire, then it seems to me that the desire, the ability to imagine the next step sort of doubles. It's like you have $1,000, and then you have 2,000, then 4,000, then 8, then 60. It kind of follows that. Like as you have more success with the smaller, more believable things, it gets easier to imagine the bigger things and the bigger increases. So I would encourage anybody who is sort of starting out with this, if you don't feel like you're having success by imagining yourself, too far outside your comfort zone, which a lot of people encourage, I see that all over. Don't imagine too small. Really, like that just doesn't work for some people. I don't think that would have worked for me. It was the same thing with my body. While my ultimate goal was to be at my ideal weight. Along the way, there were sort of milestones, mile markers, where I was like, okay, well, I remember when the last time I weighed 170. If I see that number, it's going to be like I'm rewinding 10 years because I haven't seen that number in 10 years. And then, oh, okay, well, when I get down to 155, that's where I spent, the years that I was 22 to 25, that's going to be crazy. Like I remember feeling great about myself, sort of then. I don't know if great about myself, but I remember feeling attractive enough to, date then. That's going to be really interesting to see that number on the scale again. And then when I got there, it was like, oh, wow, I can't believe I'm here. The next number is 146. Like that's the lowest I ever got in my 20s. I remember I was in such good shape. And then just kind of blowing past that and saying, well, I guess I'm on my way down to, where I was in high school. And it just incrementally got more and more believable. And by the time, I got to 115, it was just like, holy shit, like, look how this all went down. So, sometimes I look at the amount, like I have a chart, like a stock chart of my weight loss. And it's just unbelievable how much I did, but it was all incremental, and it was all visualizing the next step. The one thing I did do with the weight was I always envisioned 119.9 on the scale, and I did eventually see that exact number, which was very exciting. But incremental can be the way to go, since believability and being able to actually take on the state of where you're trying to get is imperative. You won't be able to do it otherwise. Believability is absolutely crucial to making things happen. So my advice would be, don't be afraid to start small and start racking up these accomplishments, the forward progress. You can always wish bigger later. You can always do whatever you're comfortable with. It's really about what you want and what you're comfortable with, and about being successful with it, because the little successes are what build you up to bigger and better things over time, and allow you to eventually get to the point where you're ready to take on whatever your central theme in life is, the white whale, the thing that you've always wanted, that kind of stuff. That sort of ends with this beautiful journey towards a state of bliss and happiness and complete fulfillment.